Hi, and welcome back to Damn Parenting, your English-speaking parenting podcast from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And as always, we are your hosts, Eva and
Maren.
Today, we're delighted to have back with us our resident psychologist, Dr. Naomi Gibson. Hi.
Hello.
So today's topic, we're going to be tackling perfectionism in parenthood. We all know the pressures of parenting seem to be amplified actually by the day, with the concept of perfectionistic parents being one that resonates deeply with most of us, I feel, especially those of us not living in our home country. And we all know that a lot of this pressure can stem from things like social media, the external influences that are there as we're bombarded with those images constantly. Anyone that sits on their phone will know that. Then there's also the phenomenon of keeping up with the Joneses, which I feel it quite resonates with us as we are in a country that we're not surrounded by our own family and our support network. And we are mixing with a lot of different families from different cultures, different ways of bringing up children, different philosophies, different ideologies. Every family is unique, and what works for one may not work for another. This is why we're kind of coming to this. We want to actually, first of all, look at what are the signs and navigating the landscape of perfectionism in parenthood. And so we kind of want to find the balance between striving for the excellence in parenthood and also the exception of our own imperfections. And I guess most importantly, how do we cultivate a supportive community that understands and embraces the diversity of modern family life? Well, that's a mouthful. So
Speaking of perfectionism.
Yeah.
So we hope that we perfected the intro, and we hope that you understand what we're talking about is, what are our standards, where they're coming from, and how can we navigate them? That's the easy translation of it.
What can I say? I was just trying to be making sure I cover every aspect of it, because I think a lot of people probably won't think of themselves as a perfectionistic parent. It's a label you don't want to have. So that's why I'm trying to say we need to also understand that as internationals living here in the Netherlands, I can't even tell you how many different people from different backgrounds I've met, and they all have their own different things. And I feel like, oh, is that what I'm meant to be doing? And I kind of get this, oh, should I start researching this and see, am I missing out? What have I lost? And so that I feel is an element that I think many people might feel or, kind of have that feeling of, oh, I've been through that. And so that's why I thought this episode would be a great one to have Naomi shed some light and be able to also help give us some tools and skills to take on board and hopefully help calm, me down anyway. Free therapy session alert. So Naomi, first off, I guess we should actually just break down. Can you give us any signs of perfectionism in parenthood in general?
Yeah, it's something I see a lot clinically that, can be connected to high levels of anxiety or low mood, or kind of something a bit more sort of obsessive in your parenting. But it often just looks like a low tolerance of sort of making mistakes, or a feeling like you've failed if you've done something wrong. And it kind of a little bit goes back to that reparenting episode we did on, feeling like you're trying your best to rewrite the scripts of your own family. And if you shout at your child, then you're an awful person, and feeling like perfectionism coming up in those ways. Like, unless I'm excellent, perfect, right every time, always gentle with my child, then I'm awful. There being sort of no gray area. When we know in life, and particularly in parenting, it's a whole lot of gray. You might be having like a great minute and then an awful minute, and there's just so much nuance in between. So perfectionism really just looks like not so easily tolerating the gray. And I particularly see it in mothers that I work with. It's certainly around in dads too, but in mothers, they might have used perfectionism really effectively in their life up until becoming parents. So it's often quite rewarded in work environments, in friendships and relationships, to go the extra mile, to strive, to work late nights, to make everything perfect, in your studies or your work or whatever. It can often feel like you get rewards from that. And then when you become a parent, you're not getting a tap on the back or a well done from your baby or your child. And that perfectionism, it's almost like the sort of the tool that helped you can no longer help you anymore, but you're keeping going with it, trying to be perfect. Does that make sense? You're both nodding like,
Oh yeah,
I know it.
Yeah. The one thing that really resonated with me was the beginning, what you said, that how does perfectionism look from the outside? And I was thinking about it, and I thought when you said the word anxiety and stressed and having low tolerance, and that's exactly what it is, because you're so occupied with this narrow-minded lane that you have put up for yourself, like this is how it has to be, that I feel the more I try to perfect the tasks and the things, the more anxiety I get, because the more I feel I have to keep it under control, especially when I have perfected one thing. Okay, this is good now, so I gotta keep this going. But then the next thing, so like you said, it doesn't, from the outside, I feel the more perfectionist I am, the more irritated I am, the less tolerance I have for the gray areas. And I was thinking back, who are the people that I think have a vibe of they're relaxed, they're just with themselves, and then you look in their, let's see, their home, and it's like this gezellig clutter, and it's like someone lives here, and you can see, oh my God, the breakfast stuff is still there, but it's not, you don't have the judgment of, ooh, she doesn't have her shit under control, but it's like, okay, great, like the breakfast bowl is still there, but she or they, the parent seems to be content, and this is exactly what I feel like, that the more you let go, or the more you just aim for not having everything under control, the more you can emotionally be under control. I have a feeling when you said the whole, yeah, how does it look from the outside? And that's exactly what I feel. The more I control, the less I can control myself. Because there is no space. There's just no headspace for then on top of the emotions that I have to control. So that kind of like completely goes berserk while I'm so busy with everything outside.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say control, because perfectionism is actually an illusion of control, that
Yeah.
you so desperately want to get everything in order and want to be controlled. You want your children to be dressed nicely and you to feel like you never lose your shit in public or private or whatever. And
Yeah.
actually it's kind of everything's out of control in parenting, in a sense. There's things that you can manage, and but a lot of it's just tolerating the sort of fact that you can't get things in control. And sort of to go back to my point before, like this, I think in parenting is a very unique experience of being out of control that you probably never had apart from when you were a child and you were under the control of your parents. It's this feeling of kind of having to go with the flow and nothing being perfect. And it's
I think
it can be really stressful.
When I was sitting down taking my notes, I don't know when, one of the things that I feel many people might realize is the fact that, like, in parenthood in general, it's the fact that, yeah, when you're striving for perfection, it's like, I got this, I got this. The big tricky thing is children are constantly changing. So the thing is, when you perfect, I got the baby's rolling around, you're like, yeah, I got this. But then the next challenge is like, oh, they got to sit up. And then you're, oh God. And then it's that thing of, I need to perfect this. And then they got to stand, and then they got to talk. And then they got to, when they go to school, then there's the grades. There's no constant. And I think as an adult with our own life without children, we have work that has boundaries, and it's a wall, it's a room, we know exactly what we have to do. But with children, it's just constantly changing. Like the minute you're trying to catch up with yourself, it's the next block already. And I think that's the thing hopefully everyone will resonate with, to kind of go, oh yeah, it's that. And I think it's that peak when you kind of go, I'm kind of getting it, but then you drop all of a sudden to the next level. That's where it's not burnout, but it's just that whole critique, exhausting feeling of constantly at yourself. And I think hopefully people will be able to recognize that element of this conversation, I guess, is to kind of say, that's also included in perfectionism in parenthood as well.
Yeah. And perfectionism looks like when you've had a normal failure of parenting or humanness, losing your temper, getting something wrong, whatever it is, then that is felt as like a massive failure and a shame that you have done that. So if you're always striving for perfect, anything less than that feels like a massive failure, when in fact it's not. So, the perfection of your children ever changing, you could feel like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing now, we're weaning, or I don't know how to be with a 7-year-old and their friendship challenge at school. And you can feel like you're constantly failing because you're striving for perfection.
Yeah, one thing that with perfectionism also, and that really helps also in your argument, Eva, is the whole thing of, I always think if something is perfect, it can never be changed, right? Because everything I change now will make it less. But then, like you said, Eva, we don't deal in parenthood with a situation that we can perfect, because it's always changing. There is never a status quo that we establish where we say, okay, this is how it will be every day at this minute, at this time, and this is my constant. Like, that's just not happening. So that makes it even harder when you try to perfect this with something that's constantly moving, constantly evolving. There's very little plateau. There's really, like you said, it's like uphill, uphill, uphill. And then you have plateau for like 2 days, and then it's like next one. And yeah, so this is really so hard, this whole concept of trying to freeze something and really like to conserve it when it's just not possible, because it's like air. It goes everywhere, and it can go this way, and then there's a storm, and then there's a mild breeze, and then there comes the rain, and it's like really hard to, how do you even back this in? How do you even work with something that is constantly changing? And which is also the beauty of parenthood and seeing your child growing up, that they are constantly changing and evolving and showing another layer and another side and another character and another personality trait. And at the same time, yeah, I mean, like everything in parenting is beautiful and is dreadful at the same time.
Yeah, it's a really unique experience. And being able to, you're talking about the plateaus and things, it's almost like perfectionism makes the highs high and the lows very low, whereas actually there's going to be peaks and troughs, but it's just about being able to tolerate that difference and kind of keep it. You're neither brilliant nor awful. You just are.
Yeah. The whole thing that we said, I think it was either in a chat or something where we said, I think it was about tantrums or something, where we see then only this, and then in our head, we don't continue the sentence with comma. And at the same time, this also exists. And at the same time, these traits are also there. And at the same time, this situation was also there. We forget, it's like, this is awful. And then we make full stop and not, and
it's also the fact that we do need to address that this isn't just for like mothers, this is also for fathers. And this was something we kind of tapped on before we started this recording. Is actually a case of, we do want to highlight that this is going to affect every member of the family. So this is for both parents, but it's also going to affect the child. We're not going to get fully into that right now, but it is a case of children will sense the energy and they will sense the stress that parents are having. So when we look at, especially, for example, expats or international families, they're moving over here to take on jobs and they're coming without their support network. So you can have a mom who's basically had to leave a job back in their home country, and now they're over here trying to figure out what they're going to do with their children and with their job and what have you. And so they're like, well, I got to get something right, because I'm in a land of unknown. Or maybe the husband might be staying at home, but whoever is going to work, they've been taken over here, maybe on a high skill visa or whatever. And it's a case of, they're like, well, I'm really good at my job. And they're leaving their job to come home. And then their kids are going through these phases. So you're really good at your job, and then you come home and you're like, I don't got this. And then you're like, well, I read this book, and if you do this, your kids are meant to, align with, what you want to do. And that's the thing, is every parent, both male, female, if you've got the alpha personality, if you've got, I think actually as well, as you said earlier, Naomi, is a case of, if you've already been a perfectionist in your own previous career before becoming a parent, like that's going to have ramifications as well on it. So this is going to affect everyone in different personalities, different ways, and moving abroad and coming to a country, a different culture, different language, a whole different psychological step. So this will affect everyone. So hopefully you'll be able to share this with both husbands and wives and caregivers alike, just so that everyone knows you're on the same page.
Perfectionism is a way of feeling good short term. So there's this sort of the pull that might have come from work, as I said, or studying or whatever, where if you get things right, you get rewarded. So it's just to say that makes sense that people fall into perfectionism so easily and so quickly, because it does give you these short-term rewards. It's just over the long term that it's really draining. And thinking about then the effect that has on children, there might be more stress around if you're trying to go for perfection. But I often think of I think I spoke before about the sort of ecosystem that we live in when we're raising children. And if they see you, whoever the parent is, being harsh on yourself and saying like, oh, I made a mistake again, or that's not right, they will be learning how to do that with themselves, that they are not just good enough for being in the world, that they have to be doing things correctly or doing things in the right manner or looking a certain way. And that's, I think, the impact that it has on children.
If we're going to look at, say, signs, so some of the things you've just mentioned here, I'm just going to quickly spat out. These are some of the things you mentioned. So obviously it's the criticism. So you've got that. Then it's also the blaming yourself or when your child isn't aligning to what you're hoping for. The comparison, keeping up with the Joneses, that kind of a thing, especially with different cultures, everyone's different philosophies, losing your cool basically because, you know, you're not as easygoing. And also the fact that I think one thing I was kind of figuring is also the fact that it's not just the criticism, but it's the beating yourself up element of things where you're kind of like, oh, I'm not doing this. I don't even know what the terminology is. What's beating yourself up in a
being
clinical
self-critical.
way? Self-critical.
Self-critical, yeah.
But the fact that we're not actually, you know, we didn't know about, I don't know, you know, a certain class. Oh, there's music classes. I should have done that with my child. And oh, you know, the fact is you've just moved to a country, you've just become a parent. There's so much things that you don't know. So don't criticize yourself for not being able to do more with your children that way. So that's already quite a good list that hopefully people might be able to consider. Maybe you might tick one of them. Someone's going to hit, so I'm sure everyone's going to tick one of those, to be honest. You know, no one's perfect at not being perfect. If that makes sense.
We live, I think, in a very shifting, or our generation who is parenting right now, I'd say like who have toddlers generation. I think we are also under a huge amount of pressure because there's so much shift in things that are different now. So for when we tap back also on the topic of what is so different for fathers, the whole thing, and then social media comes into this, is that they are also expected to be, oh, okay, we have to follow patriarchy, so oh, they have to learn the new ways, and then they look up and they, oh shit, I did this wrong. I was patriarchal. I did this wrong. I have to still learn all that, and that's their load that they have to be this modern new dad. Okay, how does it look like? How do I have to change now? I have to see my wife. I have to see her struggles. I have to be compassionate with my child. Feelings. Okay, this is also a topic I have to tackle. So I can also see the load that comes with the whole change of society for fathers, and how they might have not had a role with their own fathers or their own experience how to deal with all this big shift. And then social media, they also see, oh, this is what man does with this is how the father looks. He goes to all these classes with the child now, but at the same time they're all flying to the Maldives, so someone else has to make the money. So it's like they are also under this huge pressure of these societal standards that mothers are on in a different lane, but we all have these change struggles that we're going through, especially our generation. And when we then see social media where we think we see such a weird thing of presenting at this is the norm, and then what do we see on social media? We don't see a single mom with 3 kids who lives on a minimum wage. Like there are accounts like this, but you really have to dig for them, and you have to actively go out to see this. But what are we seeing? We're seeing very privileged, filtered content, and then we think, oh, this is all we see, so this is the norm. So why am I constantly failing to meet this? And also then that's one thing that I really had to remember and really make myself aware. If I'm watching a story, it's how long is it? I don't know. In 1 minute. And then I have three sequences. So I see 3 minutes out of a day of this person. And at the same time, I think I see their whole day. Or 90 seconds even. And then this is this is the 90, but and then this I think is like the whole day, but it's not. It's 3 minutes out of 24 hours.
Yeah, there's a few things that I want to pick up on. I suppose the last point is about comparison. And you might have heard this term before. It comes from CBT. It's like compare and despair. So if you compare quickly, you're always going to fall down against the comparisons of others, you know, the shiny, perfect 3 minutes that you're seeing. And then you can feel like you have to keep striving for perfection to be similar to whoever that person is, friend, influencer, somebody you see on the street, whatever. And then the sort of, stress around doing something new. I actually think modern day parenting, you know, the move of gentle parenting and everything like that, even though I agree with a lot of the concepts, I do it with my own family, etc. It sort of sets every moment up to be a sort of high status, high kind of stress moment, if you were to see it like that, if you were living in a perfectionist way, that, you know, if you shouted at your kid, then you've failed. Everything is too high stakes. That was word, not status, stakes. Yeah, that there's constant opportunity for failure if you're not being perfect. Yeah, I think it just misses out on the gray area in between, that you can still be trying your best and sometimes do things that are not what you had planned, shouting or losing your temper or whatever. Have you guys heard of the concept of the good enough mother?
No.
Yeah, it's
haven't.
why I'm called the good enough psychologist on
Yeah.
Instagram.
That's why I had to Google it, because I was like, why are you called this? And then I realized that.
I believe very, very strongly in this concept, which came from a British psychoanalyst in the 50s, Donald Winnicott, and he observed thousands of mother-baby interactions, and it was that dyad rather than fathers and babies, and noticed that around a third of the time, people would be attuned to their baby, perfectly attuned. They would, when their baby was crying, they would feed them when they needed feeding, they would change them, and they cared for them exactly right. Only 1/3 of the time. And the other 2/3, they would miss the cues. And that happens in babyhood, but also otherwise. And he noticed that the parents who could tolerate that they were sometimes missing the mark, their babies were also able to tolerate that too. And that they learned that parents are there, that they're safe, but that sometimes they're not, and you make mistakes and you repair. And how perfection is not the key to connection. You actually lose the connection if you're striving to be perfect, and that babies need that and we need that in ourselves. So you are good enough. Striving perfection actually misses the mark. I found a quote I really liked. So Winnicott himself said, "I would rather be the child of a mother who has all the inner conflicts of the human being than be mothered by someone for whom all is easy and smooth and knows all the answers is no stranger to doubt." So knowing that we live in the grey area, that there will be mistakes, there will be doubt, you will get things wrong, you can kind of tolerate that, is better for children and better for ourselves.
That's going to be on social media. I'll be posting that out.
And also one thing that sometimes we've talked about this topic also in other episodes, but when we have this idea of, okay, this is how the situation has to look now, and now I have to set my mind to really create this image, but then we completely lose why we want to create it. So what's the need behind it, right? So we only then focus on this is how it has to look like, but we don't see, oh, what is my actual need? Why do I think I have to make the situation look like that? And where is this need also fulfilled? So super simple example where we had this, we wanted to go to the beach. We wanted to have a picnic at the beach. We go to the central station, train's not running, like shut down. There's no way to go to the beach. We could have said, oh, awful afternoon. We didn't go to the beach. We didn't get our picnic. It was horrible. But then I thought, what was our plan? Our plan was to sit somewhere on a blanket and eat our snacks, right? So where else can we do this now? And then we packed our things, we drove to the park, we did the exact same thing there, and we had an amazing afternoon. And I wasn't getting upset that the beach and was also only the outside setting. But what did we want? We as a family wanted to eat our snacks, we wanted to sit on a blanket, and we wanted to have a good time. And it didn't matter if the blanket is on sand or on grass, because
but there's something in there of being able to tolerate the disappointment.
Yeah,
that would have been a disappointing, your plan didn't go to plan. That's a shame. Your child probably was disappointed as well, but to be able to sort of tolerate that distress and manage that and know that, sure, it's not the perfect plan, but it's good enough.
Exactly.
Here we go with good enough.
No, but seriously, I come back to it time and time again. It's like it's a real sort of core value of mine as a person, but in my clinical work, definitely, of just like, what does it mean to be good enough? What are you missing out on if you're striving for perfection? Connection with yourself, connection with your child. Can you be good enough? And what does good enough mean? And I think good enough parenting is also having limits, not sort of being, there might be this super mum myth, I think, of just, the super mum has no limits, no boundaries. She's always kind. She's always warm and cherishing every moment. And then if you miss that mark in your humanness, then you might think that you've failed. But how can you be good enough? And how can you be attuned to your child most of the time and also to yourself?
I don't know where I read it, but it was a case of, I want my child in college when they move out and they're moving in with someone and they meet someone for the first time and that person turns around and goes, so what was your childhood like? Or what was your mom like? That kind of a conversation. And that child's able to go, I had a wonderful childhood, or I have a great relationship with my parents, or something like that. That's what you aspire to be. When you're looking at interviews of celebrities or whoever, and it's like, oh, how was your childhood? When people are always like, oh, my mother was amazing. She was so creative. And she was like all this, be all and end all. I don't know that I was so negative about it, but it was just that thing that was like, huh? Like as a mother now, I'm like, how can a parent be so wonderful? Like, how can you grow up? Like, it's so intense and it's so emotionally driven and it's so exhausting and there's so much pressure on us and there's so much to come considering we only have toddlers. I don't even know what school's going to bring or even teenagehood's going to bring. But it's that element of obviously they're doing something right and it must be that good enough element.
I really wouldn't want my children to think that I'm wonderful. I would want them to think that I'm
think you're
human
wonderful.
and caring. Sure, I am wonderful. No, but I would want them to like see me in my humanness, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And that is the whole spectrum of feelings and bad moods and, sure, creativity and caring and, all those things at the same time. I don't think I'd want them to look back and necessarily say, oh, my mum was wonderful.
I guess we want them to say, I feel connected. That's what they want.
She really hears me.
Yeah.
My mum really listens to me.
Yeah.
My mum's there for me. My mum knows me. Those things rather than perfection.
Yeah.
I do want to circle back to something Mara was talking about the father aspect of things. There was research done in 2015 by Pew Research Center, and this is kind of known anyway. We know that now in these days, in the last 10 years or so, dads get to spend 3 times the amount of time with their kids than they did compared to fathers back in the 60s. So that's kind of what we kind of know now. But it's also a case of Pew Research actually asked the fathers, what kind of a job do you think you're doing? Rate yourself as a father. And they said only 50% said they were doing a great or excellent job. And so 50% of fathers themselves are going, I'm not doing a good job. I'm just getting by, whatever. I do want to reiterate that the fact that fathers can also have that parenting guilt, the strive for perfection, again, between work and, supporting the family as it might be. And it was just parents, it's equal on both sides. This whole guilt, this whole self-criticism, the struggles, it's just the way we deal with it differently.
Yeah. And it doesn't start in parenting, really. If somebody's had a self-critical voice or a strive for perfection, it's probably always been there. It's just, it probably worked for a long time. And then in parenthood, there's too many opportunities for it not to work. That if you strive for perfection, you're always going to keep failing.
And this is where we'd circle back to say, and at this point, at the end of this episode, please go back to the reparenting episode with Dr. Naomi as well.
Yeah. It's all in the same package. Yeah.
How about we start chatting about how do we actually start letting go of this perfectionism? How can we start to be good enough? How can we accept this?
By accepting this. That's not a good answer, is it? But just actually to accept that you are good enough in all of your humanness and all of your attempts, and that actually in trying to be perfect, you miss opportunities for connection. And that's connection with your children, but connection with yourself as well, to know that you're good enough even if you make a mistake, make a perceived error. So really, the good enough thing, when I work clinically with people, sometimes we sort of kind of put your hands on your heart or something really soothing, and it's like, oh, gosh, that was hard, that was so hard, whatever that tantrum was, or I lost my temper, but I am a good enough mum here. I'm trying my best, and how can I move on from this with kindness? So rather than saying right, tomorrow wake up, I'm going to do perfect, I'm never going to raise my voice again, to strive, actually just being kind and saying, well, that was tricky, that was hard, I feel like I've really fucked up there, but I haven't. I'm going to do something kind, move on, get a cup of tea, and just accept. I can see from your face, Eva, that you wanted something more from that.
No, when you were talking about when you had your hand on your heart there and you're chatting, I was like, it triggered something in my head that I read research about. If you put your hand in your heart for a minute or something, it actually has the effect of calming or distress, or it's the same as a hug or something like that. I can't remember where the research was from, but it was I'd never heard it. And I thought, oh, but it's actually the physical presence of having your hand on your heart and breathing with it. And that is meant to help calm you. So it's just good to know during those tantrums and meltdowns.
Really, touch is very powerful in terms of calming down your nervous system. I often say, put a hand on your heart, put a hand on your belly, hug yourself, Sometimes people find like a butterfly hug. Have you ever heard of that? Which is like sort of tapping, can be really soothing in the same way that you would soothe your child often, stroking their hair, stroking their back, give them a warm presence. You can do that with yourself. And that, yeah, you're just kind of learning in those gentle, compassionate gestures to yourself that it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes and still be good enough.
Having a meltdown in Albert Heijn and the mother is stroking their hair, just know that that's what's happening.
One thing that I also want to put in there into the bowl is that sometimes when we let go of these expectations, we open up this other room for gain. So one example is, okay, we want to make the perfect dinner. And then what's the goal? We want our family to be fed. And then sometimes, okay, how can I put dinner on the table? I'll go to the supermarket, I grab a ready lasagna, I pop it in the oven, and while I don't have to cook, I can connect with my child because now I can sit down for 20 minutes, we can read a book, we can do this, and we're all getting still fed, And it's also, I guess, that in my life, I'm not putting lasagna from the supermarket on the table 5 days a week or 6. I do this twice a week. And then that's good enough. And I can use this time where I'm failing in quotations because I'm not making the most nutritious, freshly cooked ingredients, bio, eco, blah, blah dinner. But I got 20 minutes to sit down after daycare with my child, read a book. We can have a giggle, we can paint, whatever it is, or just chat while at the same time we still all get dinner. And this is what I have really come to accept, the room that opens up and the space that is there when I'm not putting all this energy to this thing that I think I have to fulfill and I think I have to execute in a certain way. When I let go of this and I still fulfill my need, I have so much more capacity and room for something that I'm gaining. And so this is really what I try to look at in perfectionism. That's not, oh, I'm not failing, but what else did I gain instead?
Yeah. And that might be 20 minutes with your child, but it also could be gaining space to daydream yourself or do something that you need. And that's equally as important.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap this one up here. I think we're just going to end there on a couple of points that you guys have both now made, which would be, for example, staying off social media and that whole aspect of you're only seeing 90 seconds or 3 minutes into someone's perfect life, which is obviously staged and all their laundry and stuff is behind the camera. So that's one thing, is just to have a better perspective and a healthy perspective. Focus on what you actually need, be it what Maren said, like, just buy your lasagna, whack it into the oven, but to claim that 20 minutes with your child instead. And it doesn't have to be the perfect meal, but at least it's a nourishing meal as well. You said, I think it was, don't be so harsh on yourself, Naomi, like to cutting yourself some slack, as it were, like, don't. So it's a third of your day you're in tune with your child, and that the rest
about a third of interactions, really attuned parents are only meeting that attunement a third of the time.
So for example, a third of your connection time with your child is you're not on your phone, you're actually building, you're having a chat, you're reading the book or whatever, and the other 2/3, you have to cook, you'll have to clean or whatever. You might be sitting down on your phone, which is something none of us parents ever want to be doing, is sitting and having our child see us on their phone. But at some stages, sometimes have a phone call or a text message, or we get trapped up in the social media. But don't kick yourself for having your child see you that way. But at the same time, there's a healthy balance that can be maintained. Is there anything else we should be thinking about? Oh, actually, one thing you did say was about accepting not accepting failures, but like, how was it? Like your child's going to see you being able to deal, like Maren's story about, hey, we didn't get to go to the beach, but we went here. It's that acceptance of you'll tolerate, you'll move on, you're upset, but then you still are able to move on and enjoy the next step. So it's not like a failure, but it's a case of changes, I guess.
You're
modeling.
You're modeling flexibility. Some things go away, some things don't go away. They might be, plans is a good example, but also just in the way you think about something, or you drop something on the floor, or you smash something, there's a big difference between going, oh God, mum's an idiot, versus, oh, that's a shame, that happens, let's tidy it up, in what your child is learning about how to tolerate imperfections.
Sorry, one thing I just want to add here. I did see something on social media, and it was someone saying that as they were a child, they, would have butterfingers or whatever it is. And if they drop something, their mom would always shout out like, I love you more than that glass. I love you
Oh.
more than whatever, like you, the rug or whatever it was. And I was thinking, yeah, because when the child drops something, it's an immediate guilt and shame that come in. But that mother started saying that to this kid. So now this is now in my head of like, okay.
Well, it isn't immediate guilt and shame. That's learned. That's learned
Oh.
from the parents that say like, you know, oh, you've dropped something again. You're always so clumsy. Or why did you do that? Or I told you not to, you know, that's when the guilt and shame comes in. It isn't automatic for children to feel that necessarily when they make an error. They're just learning about how errors, mistakes are tolerated in the family.
Good to know. Thank you.
One thing I also wanted to add is that, and especially when it comes to bedtime, this is, I think, a good thing to practice is also not only giving the child the option to choose between black and white. So, what was the best thing in your day today? What did you do to the perfect thing? Like, where were you so happy? And what was very sad? Also asking the question, what was good today? What was this middle ground? Like aiming also in our wording to make them see the range. Oh, this wasn't the best, perfect, but it still felt okay. It was still a good enough day at daycare. It was still a good enough, whatever, vacation, whatever the thing was, is still a good enough birthday or so. Also, with your language, to give them the option that there's not just this was the best and this was the worst, but there's lots of things that happened in between. And maybe also, of course, your child, if they don't think about it, give them examples like, oh, but wasn't this nice? Wasn't this that? Wasn't this that? And we made it until we walked until the supermarket. Wasn't that great? And then I picked you up and I carried you the rest of the way. But like we made it until here. And isn't that also going halfway an accomplishment already?
That actually reminds me of just something again I watched online. And it was again someone who says, normally you think of what was the best part of my day, but what he did is he took it hour by hour. And so he actually had to look at something positive from every hour. And he said, I was asleep by afternoon, you know, but it was just that thing that he got to relive his day in a positive way to end his day that way. That takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And to be honest, as parents, I don't think we have the energy to have that. We just kind of hit the pill and pass out.
But I think you're talking, both of you, about gratitude that's not necessarily for the great or the awful, but it's just like, what did happen and what do I feel grateful for and what did I notice and what did I observe? Those like repeated exposures of doing that for children and for adults help you to notice that in your general life, that there's just things that are fine, okay, good, brilliant, awful,
Good
you
enough.
know, all of that. Yeah, and just feeling some gratitude towards that.
So I'm kind of thinking that this episode is going to be called The Good Enough Perfectionist.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Naomi. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of notes on this one, I feel. And it's also a lot of self-learning we're going to have to do. And I hope everyone's going to get something out of this, because there is something for everyone out of this. And we will have the notes, as always, on a Friday that you'll be able to circle back on. We'd love to hear from you as well on Instagram. You can always leave your messages of maybe like what you did, how you do it. Let us know if you're a perfectionist or if you're good enough. I mean, you know, I'm really loving the idea of the good enough group. Maren, do you want to take it away?
Yes. Every Wednesday, we come out with a new expert episode on this podcast. On most Mondays, we try to give you another episode, which are the Damn Chats, where Eva and I are chatting about a topic that has come our way during this week. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Make sure to activate the bell or whatever notification you can activate so you get a note when we are dropping a new episode on Wednesday with the expert or Monday with the chats. You can get in touch with us on Instagram, Damn Parenting Podcast, or via email. We hope to hear you on the next episode. Make also sure that you share and like this episode. Give us a rating on Spotify so we get seen and more parents can listen in to what we have to share and what our experts have to share with the world. And that's
one
it.
thing.
And
One thing I want to say is best of luck tomorrow, Naomi, with your launch for Jelly Pie. That's on March 8th. Congratulations and best of luck. Hope everything goes well for that.
Yeah, that's our book I've been part of about ADHD for children. It's a beautifully illustrated little bug called Jelly Pie, and written by a mum that I know who joined the group therapy back in the days, whose daughter was diagnosed with ADHD and had lots of questions about it. So yeah,
so best of luck with
that. A lot more of that.
Yeah. So thanks all. Until next time.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.